They can't explain why their pulse changes when you enter the room, but it does. Something in them responds before their mind can catch up, like a silent signal pulsing through the air. They're not reacting to your words or your actions. It's something older, deeper, more undeniable. You've been taught to downplay it, to pretend you're blending in, but the truth is you've been disrupting the atmosphere your whole life. Your presence doesn't just take up space, it bends it. Not because you're trying to dominate, but because your inner frequency refuses to shrink. And while you've spent years thinking the stares, the whispers, the tension were signs of some flaw in you, they were really proof of the field you carry. It's not arrogance. It's resonance. The stronger your alignment, the further that resonance travels. Some people feel it as an ache in their chest. Others feel it as sudden discomfort they can't explain. They'll fidget, avoid eye contact, or grow strangely hostile, not because you've done anything, but because you've reminded them of a truth they've been avoiding. Their nervous systems translate your energy into a warning, as if you're a storm on the horizon. Don't miss what's coming. Hit subscribe and join the journey today. What's wild is you haven't even fully stepped into what's possible for you yet. You've been holding back without even realizing it, walking at half speed in a world built for sprinting souls. Still, they sense the rest of what's coming, the unlit parts of you that are about to ignite. It's why some people keep their distance while pretending they're busy. There's a strange poetry in the way they try to manage your impact. They'll rehearse conversations in their heads before speaking to you. They'll rearrange themselves when you arrive, not knowing why. It's not fear of you, it's fear of the shift you represent. You're a mirror they can't control, one that reflects the gap between who they are and who they could be. Your existence alone is disruptive in the best way. You don't need a stage, a spotlight, or a grand introduction. Your arrival changes the temperature in the room. Even without trying, you remind people that authenticity exists, and that scares anyone who's been living in imitation. For years, you've wondered why certain spaces felt heavy, why certain people treated you like a problem that needed solving. It was never about you being too much, it was about them being too afraid to stretch into the fullness you stand in naturally. They can't articulate it, but their bodies know, being around you requires growth. And that's the secret they'd rather you never realize. The minute you understand the depth of your influence, the quiet ways you've been rearranging realities, you stop doubting yourself. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop trying to make yourself palatable for people who've never even tasted truth. When you do that, when you step fully into that space, they won't just feel you. They'll remember you. Not because you demanded attention, but because you left a mark on their spirit that no amount of forgetting can erase. And that's when they'll know they were right to be unsettled. You were never ordinary. You were the change they couldn't control. Some people sense the truth in you before you've even spoken. It's in the way the air shifts when you arrive, as if the environment itself adjusts to make room for what you carry. They can't quite name it, but they feel it in their bones. And deep down, they're hoping you never notice. But the moment you do, the balance tips, and they know it. It isn't your voice that uncovers what's hidden, it's your presence. You walk into a space and the unspoken begins to unravel. People who have been burying parts of themselves suddenly feel the weight of those hidden pieces. They might smile, they might talk as if nothing's wrong, but their body language tells another story. They feel as though you've placed a mirror in front of them that can't be turned away. In a culture that thrives on facades, someone living without a mask is a disruption. Not because you're trying to be one, but because realness in its pure form leaves no place for falsehood to hide. Some will pull away quietly, avoiding your path, not out of dislike but because you make them aware of the gap between who they are and who they claim to be. They may never admit it, but your mere existence forces a kind of confrontation. It's not the kind of confrontation that involves words, it's a confrontation with themselves. And for many, that's far more frightening than any argument. They've grown accustomed to the comfort of their shadows, and you are the daylight they didn't ask for. Because of that, you've likely been misunderstood or labeled unfairly. People might have treated you as if you were the cause of tension, when all you did was stand still and let the truth ripple outward. It's not hostility that unsettles them, it's the way you make dishonesty harder to maintain. Your light doesn't arrive with a warning siren. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, and in doing so, it reveals fractures in the illusions people have built. Even your silence speaks in ways their ears can't ignore. And though they may pretend otherwise, they are aware, on some instinctive level, that being around you requires change. Rather than face that change, many will attempt to redirect the discomfort toward you. They'll point fingers, create stories, and hope that shifting the focus spares them from the deeper work. They may never say it outright, but you'll notice the subtle changes in their tone, their eyes, their movements when the truth gets too close. What unsettles them most is that you aren't trying to expose anyone. You aren't hunting for secrets. You simply refuse to join the performance. You stand where you are, grounded, and that quiet refusal dismantles the charade without you ever lifting a hand. And when you truly embrace that this is part of your nature, not a flaw, not a mistake, you'll stop softening yourself to make others comfortable. You'll stop dimming what was never meant to be hidden. And that's when the very thing they feared will happen. You'll step fully into what's right about you, and they won't be able to look away. Some carry eyes that move past the surface, cutting through polished words and practiced smiles as if they were made of glass. Without asking, the truth arrives, uninvited and undeniable, and it lingers between breaths. Moments others celebrate, you read differently, you notice the cost etched into the edges, the silence tucked behind the noise. Your refusal to nod along with what feels false is like pulling hidden thorns from beneath the skin of an illusion. The reaction to this is rarely gentle. It's not the truth itself that burns them, it's seeing themselves without the protective haze they've lived inside for so long. That sudden clarity is a shock to the system, and rather than confront it, they prefer to project the discomfort outward. Pointing fingers at you feels easier than dismantling the fragile structures they've depended on. What rattles them isn't just that you see, it's that you remain whole in the seeing. You embody the proof that a person can live without bending to collective delusion and still thrive. To them, that's more dangerous than any accusation. It suggests life exists beyond the scripts they cling to, and that realization threatens the foundation of their entire identity. While most wait for approval before moving, your compass turns inward. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't crave applause. It responds only to the call of something deeper than consensus, something older than expectation. And because of that, those who rely on influence as their weapon find no handle on you. You can't be drawn in with shallow praise or moved by silent intimidation. The usual tools, guilt, flattery, subtle exclusion, slide off of you untouched. The absence of control makes them restless. They aren't used to someone who will simply turn away from a poisoned offer, even if it means standing alone in the aftermath. That choice is misread as arrogance by those who've never stood on solid ground of their own. They call it rebellion, stubbornness, detachment, but what they truly mean is, I can't bend you. The discomfort is not a testament to your cruelty but to your refusal to dilute what is real in you. You've outgrown the molds they keep for safe company. Their systems expect compliance, yet you are the contradiction that keeps proving those systems aren't absolute. The core of your strength isn't effort, it's alignment. You are not propelled by the hunger for status, but by the pull of a path that exists beyond performance. That unsettles those who traded their essence for a seat in circles of pretense. They can't categorize you, can't predict you, can't decide your next step before you take it. To them, your freedom is a reminder of their captivity, and nothing exposes a cage more sharply than watching someone else walk unchained. From the beginning, you were never here to blend in. You carry a pulse that disrupts patterns, a signature that doesn't match the inherited codes of the spaces you enter. It's not rebellion for its own sake, it's repair. You arrived to fracture cycles, to pull truth to the surface, to end the repetition that has been passed like a shadow through generations. And in doing so, you've become the one they never saw coming, the interruption they can't undo. There's a current in you that stirs things awake in others before a single word is spoken. It's not charm, not theatrics, it's a wavelength their spirit isn't used to. Standing near you can spark changes they didn't plan for. Old habits seem heavier, buried truths begin to itch toward the surface, and new clarity arrives without warning. You don't force it, your energy simply speaks a language they can't ignore. What you once mistook for being pushed aside was something entirely different. That distance wasn't punishment, it was preservation. You read it as being left out, but in reality, you were being kept apart for reasons far bigger than the loneliness you felt. It wasn't abandonment, it was positioning. You were held in reserve, not because you lacked value, but because what you carried needed to stay untouched until the right moment. Being accepted too soon, by the wrong circles or under the wrong influences, would have watered down what you were built to carry. The quiet years weren't wasted time, they were an intentional shelter. While the world raced for visibility, you were learning the art of moving in silence. While others bent for applause, you were being shaped by trials meant to sharpen, not weaken you. Your absence from certain stages wasn't due to being overlooked, it was because you were too potent to be placed carelessly. Some were given early recognition because what they held didn't need guarding. But your ideas, your presence, your essence, those required protection. The wrong access would have tried to twist it, diminish it, or package it into something unrecognizable. You weren't just hidden from harmful hands, those hands were kept from reaching you. Now, as you begin to step forward, the ground reacts. People shift, atmospheres stir, truths come loose from the corners they've been hiding in. It's not in your head, your movement changes the environment. They don't fear you because you're loud, they fear you because what you carry doesn't fit into the frameworks they know. Those quiet years were never about standing still. They were about becoming coated with the ability to hear what others miss, to heal without bitterness, to stand alone without collapsing, to carry influence without being consumed by ego. You were being strengthened from the roots up. And now that the covering is lifting, the shift is visible. It's not your name that unnerves them, it's the force they sense moving through you. Your thoughts cut through the fog others rely on to keep control. They're not facing a louder voice, they're facing a clearer one. You've never been one to accept things simply because they're presented neatly. You peel back layers, test the weight of the truth, and see what's behind the curtain. That instinct was never a flaw. It's the very design that keeps you untouchable, and it's why the moment you fully step into it, nothing around you will stay the same. Some are wired to catch what others miss, and you are one of them. Where most see only noise, you recognize the pattern inside it. The smallest shift in tone, the tiniest hesitation in a story, the gap between a smile and the eyes, it all speaks louder to you than words themselves. Others call it overthinking, but it's simply your inner compass reading the room before your mind has even processed it. Falsehoods bounce off you. Confusion can't settle near you. And those who thrive on keeping others in the dark feel that resistance like a wall they can't climb. Your presence becomes a problem for anyone who depends on blind acceptance to keep their influence. You notice absences in conversations, the missing pieces in explanations, the cracks in polished surfaces. You ask the questions no one wants asked, the kind that loosen the threads of entire narratives. They're unsettled by your refusal to take anything at face value, by the way you think without being told how to think. Attacks come not because you sought a fight, but because they expected compliance and received strength instead. The environment you were molded in was built to convince you that power didn't belong to you. Approval was offered only as long as you stayed easy to manage, predictable, and quiet. When you began claiming space for your own thoughts, when you decided your worth didn't need anyone's stamp, when you set boundaries instead of bending, the tension began. Not because you became unkind, but because you stopped being available for their control. You refused to trade self-respect for peace that wasn't real. You stopped carrying burdens that were never yours. By choosing to stand fully in yourself, you dismantled the fragile balance they'd been selling to others as harmony. In doing so, you revealed that the stability they clung to was only stable because you were keeping still. Once you moved, the whole structure shook. And rather than admit the truth, they called you difficult, distant, or proud. What truly shifted was your refusal to shrink. You stopped silencing instincts to avoid conflict. You stopped bending truth to protect fragile egos. You stopped holding the weight of problems you didn't create. The pain you walked through became a foundation for clarity instead of a source of bitterness. Many emerged from hardship fractured or hardened. But you emerged activated. Every wound, every disappointment, every betrayal was transmuted into insight. That process didn't just change how you think, it restructured how you move in the world. You became fluent in navigating depths most avoid their entire lives. Because of that, you rose with authority that can't be borrowed, bought, or faked. You didn't just survive, you studied the terrain while surviving. You learned the mechanics of silence, the tells of deception, the subtle machinery of control. You asked the questions no one else dared to ask. Who gains from my quiet? Who benefits from the limits placed on me? You didn't bury the answers. You carried them forward. And now, every step you take carries the weight of what you've seen and the certainty of what you've learned, making you unshakable in a world that depends on people looking away. Some can sense the fracture lines in a sentence, the shadow under a compliment, the tension that lingers even when no one names it. It isn't fear speaking, it's experience sharpened into instinct. That kind of perception isn't found in books or lectures. It's carved into you by seasons that demanded you see clearly or lose yourself. What you carry now is not just awareness, but a spiritual certification earned through fire. When you speak, it's not just sound, it's a shift. You don't aim to inspire for applause, yet people leave conversations with you feeling stirred in ways they can't explain. Your presence doesn't skim the surface, it presses into the places people bury beneath routine and distraction. Memories they've locked away begin to move. Feelings they've ignored start tapping on the walls. Truth has a way of landing differently when it passes through you, and it lingers in them long after. It's why some feel exposed around you, even without confrontation. You're not drawn to the polished roles people present, you lean into the raw version that exists underneath. That unedited self, the one they've traded for acceptance or survival, comes alive in your presence. And for many, that's a mirror they aren't ready to face. So they retreat. They create distance, label you too intense, or pretend you've changed. It's not your intensity they fear, it's what your steadiness makes them remember about themselves. Your assurance doesn't shout, it carries a depth that unsettles those used to performance-based confidence. What you hold isn't fragile, so it doesn't need to prove itself. This certainty didn't happen by accident. It's been with you longer than you've had the words to name it. There's always been a sense that your life isn't random, that you came with a design etched into you before you took your first breath. That knowing is why manipulation slides past you instead of sinking in. The usual tools others use to bend people, guilt, flattery, emotional traps, break on contact with you. You're not closed off, you're simply no longer accessible in ways that compromise you. And to those who survive by steering others, that makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability feels like a threat. You've walked through the machinery of control, seen how it works, felt its pressure, and survived it without letting it claim you. Now, you spot the levers before they're pulled. You hear the twist in a phrase, notice the shift in tone, feel the intent long before it's confessed. Once recognized, you don't linger in the snare. You step out, not from fear, but from knowing the cost of staying. You don't need to wait for proof, because you've learned to read what isn't spoken. People reveal themselves in more ways than words, through timing, energy, and the weight behind their presence. This level of clarity was forged, not gifted. It was built in the long nights when you had to separate what was real from what was crafted to keep you still. That refining burned away naivety, leaving a discernment that doesn't just observe, it interprets. And now, you carry a perception that can't be bought, borrowed, or broken. There's a cost to silencing that inner alarm, to giving the wrong people another chance when everything in you said no. That cost became your teacher. It didn't just toughen you, it refined you into someone who sees through the fog others still walk in. What you've gained is more than caution, it's a sharpened spiritual lens that makes you impossible to lull back into complacency. The shift in you unsettles those still anchored in their comfort zones. You didn't bring harm. You didn't betray. You didn't attack. You simply refused to keep playing along with roles that never fit and rules that served no truth. And the moment you stepped out of those cages, it forced others to notice the walls around them. You've torn down the idea that safety requires staying small. You've stopped nodding to avoid tension, stopped agreeing just to keep the peace. You started asking questions that cut straight to the foundation of things. To people still invested in pretending, that's a dangerous move. Your growth has become a mirror they can't escape. Standing near you makes them aware of the shackles they've chosen to wear. Instead of letting that awareness lead them to freedom, some turn cold, because resentment is easier than transformation. For those who only understand power as dominance, your balance is disorienting. You can walk away from destruction without explanation, yet face injustice without flinching. You're not bound to one extreme. You carry both the strength to end storms and the force to start them when needed. Your very presence challenges the idea that you must fit a mold to matter. You are the unexpected, a form that bends no knee to image or permission. You show what happens when deep inner work meets a courage that won't retreat. Every rumor, every distorted story, every shadow thrown in your direction is evidence that they've felt what you carry. Even your stillness holds weight. It disrupts the narratives they've built to keep their illusions intact. They never planned for someone who could stand without a podium, speak without seeking validation, and still shift the atmosphere. You've learned the quiet strength of not rushing to defend yourself against falsehoods. Some accusations aren't worth your breath, because the intent behind them was never to understand. Choosing not to engage isn't weakness, it's precision. And in that restraint, the power moves. The moment you stopped offering explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you, the energy around you changed. Your silence became its own kind of declaration, one they can't unhear, no matter how hard they try. What unsettles them most is realizing you operate outside the unwritten codes they thought everyone obeyed. You're not measuring your worth against their opinions. You're not chasing their invitation to feel included. You're not trading your values for applause. This isn't detachment, it's the kind of inner liberation that breaks the dependency on outside approval and severs the leash most people never question. The real threat isn't your volume, it's your resilience. Where others crumble under opposition, you gain strength. Every resistance you face clarifies your allies and exposes the pretenders. Every attempt to reduce you only reveals how much force you already hold. And the more they try to silence you, the more undeniable your presence becomes. Quiet endurance frightens power structures more than loud rebellion ever could. Authority without hostility is rare. You're not seeking to dominate, yet your steadiness commands attention. You shift atmospheres without coercion, you alter perspectives without manipulation. That kind of presence is harder to discredit because it works from the inside out, restructuring environments simply by existing in them. You've become a signal that resonates with those ready to remember who they are and disrupts those invested in staying asleep. What you carry isn't built on influence, wealth, or recognition. Its source is older than systems, deeper than doctrines, a direct tether to truth that doesn't fade when challenged. No one can sever that connection. Criticism can't shrink it, and compromise can't corrupt it. They recognize you have access to awareness they can't fabricate, insight they can't imitate, and wisdom they can't buy. And it unnerves them to stand in the presence of something that can't be owned. Your clarity cuts through their disguises before they realize they've been seen. You don't engage with the version they parade for the public, you read the one that hides underneath. That's the version they hope no one would ever meet. By refusing to bend to structures built on control, you give silent permission for others to step out as well. Your willingness to walk alone proves that solitude is temporary, but integrity is permanent. You choose principle over popularity, and that choice becomes its own form of leadership. Your influence reaches further than proximity. Every decision to act from truth instead of fear, every moment you hold your ground rather than shrink, adds to a larger shift happening far beyond your immediate world. They fear you not because of what you take from them, but because of what you awaken. You stand as living evidence against the belief that freedom, integrity, and strength can't survive in today's world. Your existence dismantles excuses. Their resistance doesn't dilute your power, it refines it into something they can't match and will never be able to contain.